I'll hold the mic and you can ask those questions, but that will allow the folks who are watching online to hear you as well. If you're watching online, so glad you're here this morning. Send me a note. If you have questions, you can use the questions link, send me an email, whichever. If Professional Development Network or PDN credit is helpful to you, as a faculty member, please register for this course. There's a QR code on the clipboard, and just make sure you check in with me. I have many new faces this morning, so I don't know everybody. So check in with me to make sure that you get the credit. Winnie is with us this morning. She lives here. She's supposed to be here, so see the dog walking around. That's normal. Any other announcements? Okay. We had a science festival. Many thanks to all of you who helped with the science festival this past weekend. It was amazing. I'm very excited this morning to have Amelia Winger-Bearskin with us. Amelia is the Banks Chair of AI and the Arts at the University of Florida. She's a guest with us today. The title is Immersive Indigenous Storytelling and the Intersection of AI and the Arts, which is in itself, I can't wait. I'm so excited. And I need to tell you all that her presence here and her presentation this morning is funded in part by the VC Diverse Voices Lecture Series. With that, I'm going to turn it over to her and let you say all the wonderful things.
Much. I'm so excited to be here. It's just been such an honor to meet so many of your faculty, students, and staff. Thank you. My name is Amelia Winger-Bearskin. As she mentioned, I'm a Banks Endowed Preeminence Chair of Artificial Intelligence and the Arts at the Digital Worlds Institute at the University of Florida. I'm the director of the U.S. AI Climate Justice Lab, and I'm the founder of Wampum Codes, which is a podcast and an ethical framework for software development based upon the principles understood by our people, the Seneca and Cuba Nation, she, her pronouns. And like all members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, we made wampum. So a lot of people have a misconception about what wampum is. A lot of people think it was a form of currency. It was more like a decentralized means of recording contracts. So something like maybe a pre-Columbian blockchain, you could think about it like that. And it encoded not just financial transactions, but also ethical values. So my project of Wampum Codes is to try to imagine how we can weave ethics back into the 21st century technologies. We can embed these values as dependencies in the code, the same way we might put it in our package.json, that's my thoughts, or by implementing a decentralized protocol around ethics in AI software, so we can take a step in the right direction. We live our lives according to a moral code, and I like to say that it's time that we learn how to code our morals. So I'm going to be reading two short pieces for you today. One is called, Is AI Art Really Art? Hopefully we'll answer that question. And the second is called Advice for Artists. And so maybe you don't consider yourself an artist, and so you can imagine every time I say the word artist, it means creator, innovator, thinker, dreamer, believer, right? So I use the shorthand of artist because that's what I chose for this topic, but I think that word encompasses so many of us here, and I'm so honored to be staying here in the CID where so many people are creative and innovative and are dedicated to live together with that. Maybe we could turn down the sound of the video a little bit. I think it might be good if you can hear in the back. If not, I can speak a little louder. Thank you so much. All right, so first question up, is AI art really art? So millions of images are generated with code, right? And they've fueled an engine of a new economy. But modern art has been associated with a lot of shenanigans over the year. So is AI art the dawn of a new era? Or is it the art world's latest prank? Generative art uses techniques from machine learning, as we know, and machine vision to generate images. And it's produced a lot of headlines around the subject of what is and is not art. So to me, the answer is clear. AI art, AI-generated art, is art. Of course it is. It follows recipes, and it has inputs and outputs. Developing the recipe, that's art, okay? Using the recipe to bring something new into the world, that's also art. They're both art. Why is that so controversial? I imagine it's because when some people think of art, They're picturing the little reproductions of like famous paintings you might find on a mug, or like water lilies or sunflowers or the Mona Lisa. And they're remembering works that they've seen as school children on slideshows or in textbooks. And it's true that not everyone knows as much about, modern art, and the world has become, and the word modern art has sort of become a synonym for abrasive or nonsensical, maybe even ugly, or, maybe unlovable. I don't know. But you can draw a line from today's generative art right back to the beginning of modern art. One of the people I think of is Marcel Duchamp. So you may have know him as that guy who put a urinal in a gallery and then called it art. That guy, right? So that's correct. He forced a new way of looking at the objects that are all around us. Shovels, math textbooks, bicycle wheels, right? Chimney ventilators, which he termed ready-mades. In the early part of the 20th century, many of these prefabricated items were new enough to feel unfamiliar and strange. But at the same time, they were quickly becoming so ubiquitous that it was almost like they were invisible, right? So new and yet so ordinary. Duchamp's ready-made pieces brought these objects to view in a new way. And he caused audience to ask new questions like, is this even art? What am I looking at? What did the artist actually do here? What is the work of art? And should we may not restrict that like a little bit? That was kind of a lot of the questions people were asking. So artists have been probing these same questions for the last century now. The consensus seems to be, we should not restrict the definition of art. In fact, we should expand it. Art doesn't even need to have a physical form. It can be completely immaterial. It can even be smell, right? I know a lot of smell artists. I think that's pretty cool. So what matters is the decisions that the artists make, how the public interacts with it, and what it means to the community and the culture from which it springs. In AI-generated art, it might seem like the computer's making all the decisions. It may be that the artist doesn't understand everything about the algorithm that's doing something there. I mean, look, as a coder and a developer, sometimes I don't understand everything that's going on there. We've all worked with code bases, So to be fair, the little black boxes exist everywhere. So nothing at all will happen, though, without any input from someone. And that's the point where you find the art. When a person calculates how to weigh their machine learning models, or makes decisions about the training data, or many other choices about how that process works. So some objects and tools available to make this kind of work may seem as though they're doing all of the work. Their output is difficult to predict, and they seem to have minds of their own. But before an artist can make interesting decisions, such as a tool, they'd have to spend years studying and gaining proficiency in a whole new technology, like many of you are doing here. Critics, curators, and the art-going public in general would have to develop new ways of interacting with that work and new criteria to look for them. A new art will form new art, but when has it ever been any different? So that's my piece about is AI art really art? So I look forward to some questions about that. My next piece that I'm going to read is called Advice for Artists. And again, feel free to imagine that the word artist is creator, innovator, thinker, dreamer, hoper, someone with an empathetic heart. So here's how it goes. If you've been to one of my talks in the last few years, which maybe this is your first one, you may have heard me answer a question with this advice. If you want fame, find community. If you want ideas, collaborate. If you want money, find a way to help. I came up with this after finding myself in many question and answer sessions and talks and noticing how the questions fell into a couple categories. How do I get famous? How do I get ideas? How do I make more money? How do I get more? How do I be more? How do I do more? So one time I was even at a talk and someone said, I think that everything I want is inside of you, which made me feel like I was kind of over at a zombie's house for dinner. It's a little weird. It's like, okay. But I don't think she was a zombie, and creepiness aside, that's why we give artist talks. We do lectures in all of each other's classes. We do this. We go to film festivals, art openings, sit on panels. We spend so much of our time and activities not making art, right? Doing this other important work. Why do we do that? Well, we do it to try to see if the road that we have walked is helpful to others. Whether it be new artists or veterans in this weird, wild, creative art and tech space that we live in. So let me break this down a little bit. If you want fame, find community. A lot of people in the art world want fame, but what does fame mean? You know, as an artist, usually it has to do with what your peers or like a scene that you're working in or trying to break out of, or in other words, who your community is. It doesn't make much difference whether you want fame for its own sake or whether you see it as a means to a nobler end. Fame is just a byproduct of the fact that a community has carried you for a long time, and that's how you got where you are. It may feel like someone goes around with this big flashlight that says, you know, fame, and then shines it on someone for 15 minutes, right? Kind of feels like that sometimes. And maybe it does happen sometimes. But when most people find themselves in the spotlight, it's usually because they have a friend, a family member, business connection, all working together behind the scenes. People become famous because they have value to a community. Fame is about being something to someone, and it usually starts locally. So the great news is, you know, for people like me who don't super care about it, is that if you aim for fame with a community route, then yes, you know, you end up with the friends you made along the way. And if someone's treating you poorly, good news, if they're exploiting you, that's not your community. That's not the people that are going to rise you up, right? So you don't got to worry about that. So you can and will succeed elsewhere. All right, if you want ideas, collaborate. If you ever feel like you've run out of ideas or the river of inspiration has run dry, call up a friend. Collaborate with them on something they're working on, or generate something together. One of my favorite things to do is think of someone that I deeply admire, but for whatever reason I haven't made a project with them. I reach out and say, hey, would you like to make something with me? Or if they say yes, I try to do something original and do the organization legwork. Or, okay, how about October? I create the deadline, right? So I kind of try to help in that way. I find this works well when it's clearly time boxed. I also try to find someone with a different skill set from my own, and I ask them, if you could make anything in this medium, what would you make? And then I start to make work for them. I work in service. And as we continue, it becomes an equal collaboration. We both generate something that is uniquely us. The work's between two people or 200, and in my book from MIT Press, Collective Wisdom, we co-authors outline many diverse ways that you can co-create with others. Ideas don't belong to one person, they're byproducts of a network of interconnected minds thinking the same questions together. The old phrase that, you know, art is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, that applies here. With collaboration, you share both the ideas and the work. And if you're ever out of ideas and you want to give up, collaborate. The worst case is the other person will push all your buttons and annoy you enough that you'll go back in your lane and get to work, and you'll realize, you know, the grass was plenty green and you're perfectly capable of thinking of another idea. So it always works out. Oh, this dog. So cute. If you want money, find a way to help. So in the startup world, you fundraise from venture capital based on the idea that people want to buy your product because your app or your service or your platform solves a problem that they have. In the art world, it works a little bit differently, but it is often the case that when people want validation for money and money for validation. So the startup world has a version of this, but it comes in stages. You need to test out your market. You need to have people to have buy-in. You need to find an audience, and that's all those people I just mentioned, they're not the same people, right? So you need to figure out where you have something to offer. You need to have something that's not just unique, but uniquely helpful. To translate this back into an arts context, there are people who will need the type of art, creative service, performance, writing you have to offer. And I'm talking about, you know, commercial service is possible too, but even just your artwork, there are people who their life's work is to help and support what you do. So I used to be on the Nashville Public Art Board, and we needed to give artists money every year based on a criteria that we helped shape and develop. And the rest of the board, we were all artists too. And so we understood how important it was for artists to help one another. And the way to help in this situation was to show up, to create something that fit into a program that artists have designed, to be a good member of the community. And your way to help could be paying attention or asking questions about your application, making it easy for gatekeepers, right, who may not be that different than you, actually, to say yes, right? So if you want something more tangible about how working in an artist studio, you could work with an artist, you could find yourself a way to make yourself valuable to another artist's system while learning the tricks of the trade and having a mentor. I've done this with artists who are well established, you know, more so than me, but I've also asked to be there for much younger mentors and ask younger people to mentor me as well. They help me to think like the next generation, and they become helpful for me to understand how my work may connect to other people and new audiences. So, Nyawe, thank you so much for listening to my talk.
Thank you so much. I love this. What questions do we have in the room? And if you're online, just type those in, and we'll get them to the we'll get them asked.
Thanks. Your invocation of Marcel Duchamp and high modernism made me kind of reflect on one of the things that has made me skeptical of AI art thus far, which is like modernism was abrasive and prickly because it had a kind of anti-capitalist, leftist, you know, change the world kind of orientation, and I have not perceived that in the discourses around AI art, which relies on these neural networks that seem to me to reproduce what already exists, to use a lot of resources. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I love that question. And you know, AI art is so broad of a field right now. Many of us have been making AI art for a long time before some maybe off-the-shelf applications were available, even before any of these models or math were ported into JavaScript or other kind of easily accessible, inputable, API-based information. And so AI art could be something like one of the members of our collective, my husband's over here, Eamon, we're in a collective called Talk to Me About Water, and one of our members creates deep fakes, right? So we've all heard of what deep fakes are, but he uses it to create deep fakes of rivers and what they will look like in the future should different climate conditions occur. Right? So that is using something that is using information from the past and regenerating that information. So sort of stealing the information of what a river looks like now to project what it could be in the future. And that's very different than maybe when I type into DALL-E, create a version of Mickey Mouse on a rocket ship, right? That's very kind of a different use. So tools are always going to be used in boring and interesting ways at the same time, right? That's what's cool about tools. People can use them to make things that you would expect, and people can use them to totally subvert what you might expect from them. And that's what's interesting about art for me. I think we're at a phenomenally interesting time when it comes to AI and art because of how democratized it is. Back when it was just us working in academia, in labs on these amazing systems, that was cool. But I think things are really cool when like an 8-year-old can do it too, because I want to see what they're going to do. And I think about the camera, you know, when George Eastman first democratized the camera and suddenly everyone in the whole world could reach into their pocket, have a Kodak camera, buy the chemicals, or have their local person on their street that was a friend of theirs develop their images and have it. We changed the way we saw the world. So many industries just revolutionized using photography as a medium for anything from forensic science to art. People said, no one is ever going to paint ever again because of the camera. It's 2023, we have cameras in our pockets, and they don't even need to have chemicals to develop them. Well, a little lithium ion maybe. But, right? But we still take photos when we still paint, right? We still make art. So I think we're at an interesting time because we're at that like Kodak camera moment where anyone can interact with these systems, and I think that's fascinating. But we'll also get a lot of like so-so stuff too. I'm sure not everyone was taking the best photography when they first grabbed that for the first time, which is kind of cool though. It starts somewhere, right? Thank you for the question.
Oh, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Indigenous storytelling in AI? I mean, I love what you told us, and I'm really, it's so generous, but yeah, I would just love to hear more about them.
Yeah, well, so, you know, myself, we're both Haudenosaunee over here, me and Brendan, and we have a wonderful creation story about how our world was formed, and it was formed on the back of a turtle, and we have a story about sky woman who falls from the cloud, and I think of the cloud as that space where we can talk to our ancestors and we can connect to each other through space and time, kind of like that cloud that also connects us through the internet, it connects us through space and time. We could even talk to our ancestors like our grandmothers, and talk to them and FaceTime them, right? So when Sky Woman came and fell to the earth, we have this template of this entire story. And if I were to tell you the story of the creation story, you would get to sit with me for about a week, and every day we kind of tell this story. It's a very long story. The first time I ever heard it was at Strawberry Festival, and it took 3 days. And after 3 days, I actually had to leave before I even heard the end of it. So we have to slow down and listen to the story of the way our world was created in slow motion, right? And I think about that as a template for how we talk about AI, because the creation story of AI isn't finished yet. We're at the very beginnings, and oftentimes we're inundated with stories that are kind of like Frankenstein or Icarus when it comes to AI, or really doomsday scenarios. Or it's almost like it's a savior. It knows more than us. It's already finished and complete, and it's a system we can't maybe like interrupt or regulate. And we're not there yet. We're not in any of those places yet. In fact, we haven't created the sustainable future of the creation story of AI yet. Its limitations, where it belongs, where it does not belong. We haven't determined that yet. And I think it's important for all of us to be part of that formation. And when I think about the Seneca creation story, the type of load that it's had to bear throughout, since I guess, our confederacy was formed around 1190, but that was just our confederacy. That's our creation story preceded that, right? So it's been through a lot. It's been through a lot of relocations and reformations of what our nation is, and yet it's held our values of peace. And it's held out in its DNA. So I think we need to be a part of this creation story of AI. So I think that's, for me, where my connection to Indigenous storytelling and AI occurs. Thank you for that question. Also, this piece that I have up here, I am showing this around film festivals right now, and I thought I would bring it to this lovely screen. It's called I Would Like to Be Midnight, I Would Like to Be Sky, and it was used landscape photography and artificial intelligence.
I was curious more about how this was created. It's a wonderful piece, and clearly there were lots of photographs, which maybe you took some of those, or your founders selected some of those. Certainly there are themes like hemisphere or mountain, and there are themes like rising and growth, and themes like grounding and settling. But can you say a little bit more about how this came about?
Well, thank you so much for that question. You anticipated my explanation, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So yes, I drove with my husband. We moved from Northern California, from his home in Oakland, to the University of Florida in Gainesville, and we drove across the country. And I brought just my plain old regular lens-based camera, very analog situation, brought that across, and I took all these photos. A lot of them are in and around my reservation in Oklahoma, and so you see a lot of kind of that region. But really, I took photos throughout the entire journey from Northern California all the way down to Florida. So I took all of these photographs. And then, they sat around my head for a long time. I really wanted to create something with these photographs. And I used an algorithm that's been around for a long time, which is just, pixel remapping, or sometimes people call it pixel morphing. And I also used image in painting, another algorithm that's been around for a long time, but gotten a really big kick from the high, computational devices of the GPUs we have nowadays. You can do even more amazing training on them. Those algorithms were originally made for touching up old photographs, or photographs that had something missing in them, or recolorizing. But what I did is I used it to erase the built structures of man, so that you just see the landscape. So I kind of used that to create an invisibility there to kind of highlight the land, and also to see, how do we make work with AI, and what kind of work do I want to make with AI? What futures do I want to imagine? What landscapes? What places? So, and then the music, I composed and I sang on. I started off my career as an opera singer, so I'm singing on this soundtrack, and I'm singing a little bit of this poem that was written for the piece. So, and sometimes I'm singing words from that, and sometimes I'm saying words that are also becoming invisible. So I almost say an entire word, but I stop, so that I'm using that concept of in-painting on my own singing as well, to sort of echo the algorithm. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for speaking with us. A lot of my research is focused on storytelling and identity, and collective identity and individual identity. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit on that, some thoughts, in particular thinking about AI as artistry and identity. Anything that you could add to that?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. The way that I think about storytelling is heavily informed by both my parents. So my mother is, and I are enrolled members of the Seneca Cayuga Nation of Oklahoma, and her role within our community was to be a storyteller. But in our community, a storyteller is someone who's like a little bit of a politician, a little bit of like a service worker, a little bit of a historian, and a whole lot of performance, and an educator as well. So every time an elder gives you a story to tell, and you have to have gained their trust, and they know that you're an honorable person that will carry forth this role in an honorable way, they give you the story, they tell you the story, and you're not allowed to tell their version. You have to create a version that is uniquely for your generation so that you can connect to the younger generation, to your generation. You're a translator and a carrier of this knowledge from 7 generations, behind us, and you're supposed to carry it forward for 7 generations. So you're not going to tell the verbatim what they say. You're going to make it your own, but also, more importantly, make it for your generation, for the younger generation. And you slightly change the way you tell the story based on the audience. You may use information about them and put it into the story. Especially if healing needs to happen. You may have a shout out there. If someone recently lost a relative, maybe that becomes part of the story so that we can hear that and feel that and stand with that person, right? So it's kind of it's something that morphs quite a bit in that way. And then my father worked at Kodak and was part of a team that created the first digital camera. And he always told me that like the art of the future would be not just digital, but would be interactive. And I knew that already from my mom, because it's like when you tell stories, it's already interactive. It's already meeting the people where they are. And so this concept of how do we digitally do that always became sort of the way my worldview and art processing started. And AI, I hear a hope from a lot of people who ask me questions about AI, and they say, I love to work with AI because it's like collaborating with everyone in the world who ever had an idea or ever had a dream. And I think that's really beautiful, but it's not true, unfortunately, because it is the AI systems that we have are still quite biased. And so when you write a poem on ChatGPT, it rhymes in English. When you say to DALL-E, make a painting of the night sky, you're going to see something that's more close to maybe a Disney or a westernized painting than you're going to see truly collaborating with everyone on Earth, right? So we're not quite there yet, but I love that feeling. That's a cool place to get to or to aim towards, to not necessarily reproduce from stolen images from people who didn't consent to have their work within those corpuses of training data. But could we get to a point where we're really collaborating in new and deep and just and ethical ways? Yeah, let's do that. Like that, right? So thank you so much for your question.
We are just right at time, so I just want to thank you so much. Thank you for the questions, and I hope you will continue the conversation. We'll stop the recording, but please continue to have conversations in the room. We will not have a play date next week because it is Thanksgiving break, but the week after we'll be right back here with more donuts and coffee and talking about some virtual reality and augmented reality experiences with our very own Atlas and team. So everybody have a great Thanksgiving break and weekend, and we'll see you again